UFC Vegas 72 betting and DraftKings show. We have 11 fights this Saturday evening. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's bantamweight division, we have Lynn Horth making her UFC debut. She's the former strawweight champion over in LFA. She's making her debut at bantamweight, going up against Cohen, who we know previously fought on this past season of Dana White's Contender Series. She tried to make her debut a couple times now, and it just hasn't worked out. She pulled out of her last fight against Eileen Perez due to a medical issue. So hopefully she'll be able to debut this weekend against Lynn Horth. On one hand, you have Cohen, who's a great athlete, but not necessarily a great fighter. She comes from an All-American gymnast background in college. She's very athletic. On the feet, she's very low volume. She's got a couple solid leg kicks. She's not going to put a ton of volume out there. She's typically looking to just kind of grind you up against the fence. And we know she's always struggled in terms of the defensive grappling. She has been submitted multiple times in her career. And then on the flip side, Lynn Horth, I really don't think she's all that good anywhere. I think she's kind of similar to Cohen in a sense in that she's big for the division. She seems to have a little bit of power. I expect her to throw more volume than Cohen on the feet. And I think she's probably the better submission grappler, but I think this one is just sloppy on both sides. Like, it's going to be a low volume kickboxing match where the rounds might come down to which one of the females falls on top or lands a takedown or ends up not getting reversed type of deal. So I slightly lean Cohen, but I'm not confident in it, and it's overall just a pass for me either way. Next fight up, this one's at a catchweight because it was originally supposed to be Brian Kelleher taking on Newson, and Kelleher pulled out of the fight just a couple days ago, so now he's getting replaced by Marcus McGee, who's making his UFC debut on just a couple days' notice. He's actually not a bad fighter. He's a pretty decent striker, 6-1 professional record. All 6 of his wins have come by knockout. The one loss has come by submission, and I guess that would be a path to victory for Newson. I do think he's the better submission grappler, but he's not somebody that I think you can bank on to come in there with the right game plan, look to aggressively wrestle, and then get this guy out of there. I expect this to play out on the feet primarily, and on the feet, if this guy had a full camp in McGee, I'd actually favor him to win this fight outright. And even on short notice, I'm kind of tempted to take a little poke on McGee here because I do think this is a very competitive fight on the feet. I think McGee's more powerful. I expect McGee to be the one throwing more volume. It just comes down to whether or not Newson is going to grapple here. So in terms of DraftKings, I do think it's a pretty decent fight to target. Only 11 fights and not a ton of fights that I'm really excited about. I think this one is sneaky good. So I'm going to have exposure to both sides with a definite lean towards the underdog, who I don't expect to get that much ownership in McGee. Next fight up in the women's bantamweight division, Stephanie Edgar comes in as a -300 favorite with Irina Alexova on the comeback at +250. This is another debutante fighter in Alexova. She calls herself the Russian Ronda. The skill set, nowhere near Ronda Rousey. She is just basically a complete brawler, very low level, really nothing technical about her. She fights with her hands down, tries to move forward, wing heavy shots. Her cardio doesn't seem that good to me either because she has all those explosive movements early that she tends to gas out as the fight goes on. She's going up against Stephanie Edgar, who I expect to have a significant ground game advantage. Edgar comes from that judo background, and she's very good at getting the fight where she needs it. She's landed at least one takedown in all of her UFC fights. I'd expect that to be the game plan here, and I think ultimately she does find a finish on the mat. So we're going Edgar by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Charles Johnson, a -145 favorite with Cody Durden on the comeback at +125, and we have a fun matchup in the flyweight division here. I bet Cody Durden. That was my first bet of the week. I backed him for 1.5 units at +164, so obviously got some CLV on it now. Probably would stay away where it's at currently, but I do think that Cody Durden wins round 1 at least at a very high clip here. I just expect him to be the much more active fighter of the two. Charles Johnson is very talented. He's very athletic, but you just never see him really put it together because the volume isn't going to be super high. He's always struggled to defend takedowns at under 60% in the UFC. And even at times when he had a cardio advantage, like that last fight against Ode Osborne, he just doesn't do enough to put a stamp on rounds and take over, especially later in that fight. And I think that's a red flag. But either way, it doesn't look good to me when you're not putting a stamp on rounds, really, in most of your fights. And then against Cody Durden, I expect Durden to at least be doing things. And Durden, we know, comes from that collegiate wrestling background. He averages a couple takedowns per 15 minutes. I'd expect him to go to the grappling here. Maybe he gasses out and gets himself finished, but I do think he does enough to win the first couple rounds. We just need him to stay alive in the third. So we're going Cody Durden by decision. That's the official pick. And next fight up in the heavyweight division, we have Jake Collier taking on Martin Bidet. This one's currently a pick'em, and we have a lot of fights, really closely lined fights this weekend, and fights that I just don't really feel super confident picking a side. And I think that's the case here with Bidet and Collier. Collier obviously coming off that electric fight against Chris Barnett, nearly finished him, emptied the tank chasing it, and then got himself finished. Absolutely wild comeback by Chris Barnett there. Super exciting fight. But this dude's just untrustworthy in terms of Jake Collier. Like, I know he's a high volume striker for the heavyweight division, but he never looks to grapple. He's not a huge finishing threat. And if you're not going to have the cardio like he did in that last fight, well, now you have super thin margins in the heavyweight division. And on the flip side, Martin Bidet, 11-1 prospect, but despite the impressive record, he's only ever lost to Juan Espino. Despite that impressive record, I just think he's kind of a fraud, to be honest with you. I don't think he's a very good fighter. Not a ton of volume, does have a little bit of finishing ability, decent power, but mostly just looking to grind guys up against the fence. I think that could be a path to victory for him here against Jake Collier, but I think this is just going to be a really close, sloppy heavyweight decision that does go the full 15 minutes. I guess I lean Bidet just because Collier, I think, is completely untrustworthy at this point, and I think Bidet has slightly a little bit more finishing ability. So I guess I lean Bidet, but in terms of DraftKings, I think there's better fights to target on the card, and this is going to be one that I'm not going to hang my hat on either way. Next up in the welterweight division, we have Josh Quinlan, a -180 favorite, with the comeback on UFC debutant fighter Trey Waters at +155. And Quinlan was originally supposed to fight Angel Lusa, but Lusa pulled out, so that's why we're getting Waters, who's the LFA champ, coming over to make his debut here. He also fought on last season of Dana White's Contender Series, had a brutal matchup against Gabriel Bonfim, ended up putting up a fight for the first couple minutes in terms of the striking, but once Bonfim went to the grappling, that's where Waters was clearly outmatched, and that's kind of the story of his career. He's a decent striker, very long for the division, sort of has that Kevin Holland fighting style, not very sharp defensively, but in terms of the offense, he uses his length pretty well, and he has a little bit of knockout power, but it's the defensive grappling where he really struggles. Now, Josh Quinlan, I think he's just as good of a striker, if not better, much more powerful, gonna mix in the leg kicks as well, which I think Waters can be susceptible to. We've also seen Waters hurt to the body on the regional scene as well. And then I think all the grappling upside would lie on the Quinlan side. He's not much of a grappler, but we have seen him go to the takedowns at least once or twice on the regional scene. I'm not expecting that here per se, but I do think it's in his back pocket here. So I favor Quinlan in terms of the striking a little bit, and I think he has all the grappling upside. I think Quinlan wins this fight at a decent clip here. So we're going Josh Quinlan by TKO. That's the official pick. And kicking off the main card, we have another heavyweight matchup as Marcos Rogerio de Lima comes in as a -190 favorite with the comeback on Waldo, Cortez, Acosta at +160. And de Lima, we know, is a very dangerous finishing threat early. 17 of his 20 career wins have come inside the distance. 15 of those have come inside of round one. And we know he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the power on the feet. You got to worry about the submission grappling in the first round. But as the fight goes on, we know what he's notoriously known for is having a bad gas tank, because as fights get extended, he typically doesn't really have much outside of round one and typically gets himself finished because of that cardio. And in this fight against Waldo Cortez Acosta, Acosta is not like a huge finishing threat, but he is a good boxer, and he's got a 9-0 professional record. He's not great in terms of defensive grappling, so that's where I think de Lima could have big success here if he goes to it. But if he's unable to do that after round one, or if he doesn't get the finish on the mat in round one, and he starts to gas out, I think that's where it could be an issue for him against Acosta, who does have good volume, who is a good boxer, who is willing to put some volume out there, especially as the fight goes on. I expect it to really favor the Cortez Acosta side. So I'm kind of tempted here by the underdog. We're going Cortez Acosta by decision. That's going to be the official pick. Next fight up, we have Julian Arosa, minus 150 favorite with the comeback on Fernando. Padilla is plus 130. And this is another fighter making his UFC debut in Fernando Padilla. He previously fought over an LFA, but he's coming off a 2-year layoff. So there's definitely an added level of variance in this fight in what is already a volatile matchup, because Julian Arosa, basically all of his fights, there's a lot of variance because of his fighting style. He's a very skilled fighter, high volume on the feet, does have knockout power, and has that submission grappling ability. The issue is his durability, because he doesn't always have the chin to go to war like he wants to. He's been knocked out 6 times in his career. He's been rocked multiple times throughout his UFC run. And in terms of Padilla, I think the durability is there. He's never been finished in his career. He has fought pretty solid level on the regional scene. He does have a win over Derek Minner as well, and he's a pretty opportunistic finisher in his own right. A lot of his wins have come inside the distance, 8 submission victories to his credit as well. So this is one where I think both guys could have success on the feet. Both guys might even have success in terms of the grappling if it does hit the mat. I favor Julian Arosa. I think he's the more skilled fighter, the more proven fighter. I just think you got to worry about the durability, and that's why I'm not laying the chalk here with Arosa, but I do think he wins. Let me put it this way. I think if Arosa wins, it's coming by decision because Padilla is so durable. If Padilla wins, I think it's coming inside the distance. So I think this is one where you're probably going to want exposure to both sides, but we're going Juicy J by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the middleweight division, we have Rodolfo Vieira, minus 230 favorite with the comeback on Cody Brundage at plus 195. And Rodolfo Vieira, I think, is one of the more untrustworthy fighters on the UFC roster because, yes, he's got amazing submission grappling skills, but the wrestling isn't very good, and we know the cardio is bad. And there's been multiple times where he's been gassed out, and we just can't rely on him outside of round 1. Now, the positive is he's going to have a clear submission grappling edge in this fight against Cody Brundage, somebody that might be willing to follow him to the ground. But additionally, I think he's going to have a striking advantage as well. We've seen the evolution of his striking, and it's come a long way. He's got a solid jab. He's got power in his hands as well. And Brundage, I think, has pretty poor cardio as well. So I don't really see any advantage for Cody Brundage here. Maybe he's a better technical wrestler coming from that collegiate wrestling background. But again, I don't think that should be the game plan here. I don't know if it will, but I kind of just see Vieira as having multiple advantages pretty much wherever the fight goes. And I don't think the cardio is really going to be too much to worry about in this matchup. So we're going Vieira by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have another middleweight matchup as Kai Barrio comes in as a minus 345 favorite. The comeback on Michael Oleksiejczuk is plus 285. And Kai Barrio is another guy who fought on Dana White's Contender Series. He's got multiple UFC victories since then, and he's a very sharp fighter. He's solid on the feet, fights out of the southpaw stance, has powerful leg kicks, decent boxing as well, but he really manages range very well. He doesn't take a lot of chances, so he doesn't typically eat a lot of shots on the feet. But where he's at his best is when he goes to the grappling. We know he's a very good submission grappler, training with Damian Maia for years. He's very good at controlling his opponents with that body triangle. And I expect that to be the biggest advantage in this fight against Oleksiejczuk, who's going to be a much better striker. Most of his wins have come by knockout. Most of them have come early. And he's going to have an advantage on the feet, but he needs to be able to keep it there. And that's something I don't trust he's going to be able to do. And he's always struggled in terms of his defensive grappling. So I think it's only a matter of time here. I think Barrio's going to be able to take him down multiple times, control him, and eventually find that submission on the mat. So we're going Kai Barrio by submission. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event matchup between Ricky Simon and Song Yadong. This one, Simon is currently a minus 115 favorite. The comeback on Song Yadong is minus 105. And this is a really fun matchup. These guys are both very good fighters. Song Yadong obviously coming off the TKO cut stoppage against Corey Sandhagen, and Ricky Simón is coming off a dominant performance against Jack Shore last July where he won by second round submission. But I think the way these guys match up, it's very clear to me that Song Yadong is going to have to work his hardest to keep this fight off of the mat because he is going to have an advantage in the striking. He's going to be the much faster fighter. He's going to have a power advantage as well. I think that's likely the way that he needs to win is to be able to clip Ricky Simón and knock him out. And I think that's very possible. But I think over 25 minutes, this has got to favor Ricky Simón because of that relentless wrestling. He averages over 6.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Song Yadong, decent takedown defense, 71% in the UFC. But what he's very good at is not letting his opponents control him, at least not while he's fresh. He's very good scrambler, good at working back to his feet. I think that could be how this fight goes. Them trading a bunch on the feet, then Simón landing a takedown, Yadong working back to his feet or scrambling, etc., etc. I think it's a very close fight, very fun fight, but I think ever so slightly down the stretch, I think that's how Simon pulls away. We know he has great cardio. We know he's got the wrestling advantage, and I think that's going to be the difference here against Song Yadong over 25 minutes. So we're going Simón by decision. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com. That's where I'll have DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier, ownership projections, bunch of other stuff as well. It's completely free. Check it out. I'll pin it in the comments too. As always, thanks for watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.